Welcome to my podcast story, the show where podcasters share the real journey behind their voices, from their first mic check to their biggest milestones. Every episode reveals the lessons, challenges, and breakthrough that shape a podcast star's journey. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I can't wait for you to hear today's story. Today's episode of my podcast story, we have Dr. Jenn Kennedy, a clinical sexologist, licensed marriage and family therapist, and the dynamic host of Pleasure Project, Sex and Relationships. Our podcast tackles the often challenging topics of intimacy, sexuality, and relationships with remarkable expertise and openness. Based in Santa Barbara, Dr. Kennedy brings her extensive clinical experience from her practice, Rivera Therapy, into her podcasting work, creating a space where listeners can explore better sexual wellness and relationship health. What makes her podcasting journey particularly compelling is how she's transformed her therapeutic approach into accessible media content, bridging the gap between clinical knowledge and everyday application. She's here to share a fascinating journey of using podcasting to normalize conversations around sexuality and pleasure, and how she's building a community that extends far beyond her therapy room walls. Tell me your name and what your podcast is about.
Sure. My name is Dr. Jenn Kennedy, and my podcast is called The Pleasure Project, and it's about sex and relationships.
Is the podcast part of Podmatch Network?
I'm sorry, is it about what?
Is the podcast part of Podmatch Network?
Yes, it's part of Podmatch. Yeah.
Because I think I've seen it before.
Mhm.
Is it on YouTube?
It's on YouTube. Yeah. It's Spotify, Apple, YouTube. It's kind of everywhere. Yeah.
Wow. How long have you been doing the podcast for?
We are in our third year. Yeah. So I started it
Wow.
in January of 23.
I can't. Okay. Let me share my screen so you can see what I'm seeing. Is this your podcast? Okay. Is the Pleasure Project? Is that the
So
name
take out the and just put Pleasure Project.
Oh.
Yeah, there's many. That's one strategic thing that we did, is take out the, because there's so many competing. Just Pleasure Project. See, project. I don't know what those are.
Is this you?
Nope.
Oh. What's happening? Okay. I guess what
you're on
I'll do
YouTube?
is let me filter.
Just Pleasure.
Me, yeah, I'm on YouTube. Let
Uh-huh.
me filter by channel instead of video.
Project.
When you
no.
pop up, you just let me know. Okay.
It's not ranking
Wow.
great.
This is you need to work on that. Imagine you just recommended your podcast for me, and I'm trying to find it. Now, here I am struggling. Oh, that's. Do you have the special link? Can you give me the link? Let me just paste it in the chat. This is
one.
you. Yeah.
Yep, that's one of them.
After 1,000 years, I finally found it. Oh, I see why it was hard for me. The reason why it was hard for us to find is the fact that the channel name itself is Dr. Jenn Kennedy, not the Pleasure Project.
Right. The podcast is Pleasure Project, but on YouTube, it's branded a little bit different. The YouTube channel name is Dr. Jenn Kennedy. Yeah. So sorry about that. I misguided you.
Yeah. I mean, you could add. Okay. Yeah, it's there. Okay. Wow. Okay. So we'll come back to that. You've been doing the podcast now for 3 years. What inspired you to to start the podcast? Why did you start the podcast?
Well, so I'm mostly a sex and couples therapist, right? That's my day job. Is I see lots and lots of couples and individuals who are struggling with intimacy, and I find that I go through a lot of the same information over and over again with people. And I thought, okay, here's a way for me to record information that I can then disseminate to a lot more people. Or if I've given, sort of a whole talk, or I've discovered something, I can forward this and then people can benefit from it later. So I can say, hey, here's a whole lecture, or here's a whole, 30 minutes of information that people can watch and kind of do deeper learning about something. So, I mean, I was a professor for years, and so it kind of just came natural. Like, here's information that's going to help you around this topic that we can't get to in just this hour. It's a way to sort of have it, instead of it just being about one-to-one, it's kind of one-to-many. So it felt like I just have a lot of information and a lot of experience, and I wanted to make it available to more people.
You mentioned you're a professor. What are you a professor of?
I taught human sexuality. I taught couples. Those were the main 2 classes. I also taught a practicum for graduate students, but all of this was Graduate School of Psychology. So people becoming therapists.
So I was asking you why you started the podcast, and you mentioned you're a professor. So I was asking you what kind of professor you're.
Yeah, so I taught in the Graduate School of Psychology. So I taught human sexuality and couples courses. So that's sort of the area that I practice in, and that's also the area that I taught in. And that was intentional on my part because those are the areas I wanted to know really well. And I feel like teaching is the flip side. If you can teach something, you learn it differently. If you can explain it, you learn it in a whole different way than practicing it. So yeah, it was good. And it was also a good way to kind of pluck the best students that would eventually become employees too. So
Yeah, yeah. So far, you've been doing the podcast for 3 years now. How's the experience been for you?
it's a mixed bag. It's not.
Okay, let's start pulling out one by one. What's in the bag?
Well, I enjoy I wish that I could just show up and talk. That would be my favorite. The production part is a bit challenging
Oh,
sometimes, right? Coming up with all the topics, all the preparation can be a little onerous. I enjoy the discussions. I enjoy, I do both individual sessions where it's just me kind of talking, and then I also do interviews, and I like that part the best. But all the coming up with the ideas, all the production, and trying to figure out how to track down guests and that kind of thing can be kind of a lot of work. So, and then the technical part is like challenging sometimes too. So,
wait.
yeah.
I'm confused right now because you have like so many unfair advantages. Number one, the one that is just screaming at me right now is the fact that you're an expert in the topic that's of your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Most persons, they have podcasts and they just love it. They're passionate about it, but they're not what you call quote unquote experts. That's what you do. Like you're professor of the things you talk about on your podcast. So
Mm-hmm.
solo episodes should be one of the things that you should just be doing. I mean, it's easier. You don't have to coordinate with guests. The moment you sit down, you do your thing and boom, an episode is ready.
Yeah. But you have to, I can't just, I don't think it's interesting if I just talk. Like I want to have guests. And for me to have guests, it means I have to do homework, right? I need to read their book, or I need to watch their videos, or I need to do research to prepare to be a good host. Like there's a lot of preparation. If I'm going to make an interesting, compelling episode, I need to do some homework. And so that takes time. And I like doing that. It's just, balancing all of it and being prepared to do that with my job
You
is
mentioned something and that you don't think is interesting. I think that that's for the listeners to decide if they like the solo episodes better or the interviews better.
mm-hmm.
Plus, if you're doing solo episodes, you don't have to read people's book and all that. You could, you've been practicing for a long time. You've been in the feed. Um, what's the word? What's the word for the thing you studied? So I can just like call it. Did you hear what I said?
Wait,
Like, people study gynecology, study public health and stuff like that. What's the thing I could just call that? Oh, you're a professor of this.
psychology,
Oh, you're a
clinical
professor.
psychology. Mm-hmm.
What's the word before the psychology? Professor of what? There's a word you mentioned before you mentioned psychology.
Clinical.
Oh, clinical psychology. Yeah, yeah. And I'm guessing you specialize in. Well, but you mentioned you're a professor that teaches humans, sexual and all those stuff.
Yeah, human sexuality and couples, which is intimacy. So I taught the intimacy course. Um, yeah. So
Oh,
because
so
that's the
that's
area that
that's like your specialization in clinical psychology. Okay,
mm-hmm.
okay. I mean, you
Yeah.
have the
I
expertise.
also have in addition to the master's, I have a PhD in sexology. So I did
Okay.
a whole additional training that's all around human sexuality and sexology. So everything to do with like human sexuality. So yeah, the teaching and most of the coursework that I've done, most of the podcasting that I do, it's not sex per se, but it's around intimacy, it's around relationships, it's all kind of in that sphere.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many like crazy solo episode ideas you could do. Like there could be the ones I noticed that I'll get back to the YouTube channel in a short while. I noticed that you talk about myths, right? The what are some myths people have about sex and all that. Those are like you could just take
Hmm.
up one of the out of all the crazy myths that people have, pick one and then talk about it and then tell some stories. You have a collection of stories from your years of practice. Now, of course, you need to check a couple of things, but it won't take as long to prepare. And it will also be exciting because it will tell a story. And okay, let me say this, right? It might not be true for you, but oftentimes it's fun to have a conversation with guests, but we also use that as the host to escape because we don't want to tell our own story. And the reason people are on the show is because they like our taste, right? They know that you have good taste of finding guests, curating guests, and all that. And so that's why they're on the show. And so the guest that will be on your show next week will be different from the guest that will be next 2 weeks, next 3 weeks. The only constant variable there is you. And so once in a while, we want to show up and do the solo episode so people can really know us. And so you're not just that doctor who's always asking questions and they know nothing about you. Right? Yeah. Quick break. Before we continue, I'd love to invite you to join the My Podcast Story newsletter. Each week, I share highlights from our guest stories, behind the scenes podcasting tips, and resources to help you grow your own show. You can sign up at mypodcaststory.com/join. That is mypodcaststory.com/join. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, I think it's a mix. I will say when the guest comes on, it's about them more. I mean, I enjoy it when it's a conversation. I like it when it's like sometimes I'll even have another sex therapist on. So we're colleagues, right? We do the same thing. Those can actually be really interesting conversations because we work in the same space. And so it can be a deeper dive into this area because we do know a lot of the same information. When I have somebody on that's like, say, like a gynecologist or a urologist, or on Monday, I'm going to interview a what is she? She's a cognitive neuroscientist. I was like, oh, I don't know. I had to do a little research to like, what questions do I even ask her? So it's a little bit out of my realm. She's going to be the expert in the room on this. Now, I'm going to be curious. I'm in a more of a journalist like role versus when I'm the only one that's on the microphone, when it's just me doing a solo session. And I have done some where I talk about case examples, or I talk about just observations of things I'm seeing, trends and that kind of thing. It's totally different. I think, I don't know. I think listeners like both. I think sometimes, part of the point of having guests on is that you cross-pollinate. Their audiences get exposed to you, hopefully, if they're willing to promote the episode.
Yeah.
So you get new populations, but also, I don't know. Sometimes I think the solo sessions are easier because there isn't all the preparation and that kind of thing, and I can just talk. But if it's a good guest, it's conversational. It can be a really fun back and forth.
Think of it this way, like it's, how do I put it now? Instead of me thinking of guests or having guests or not, I'm like, okay, I have an idea, right? I have something I want, the kind of value I want to give to the listener at the end of the episode, right? And then I ask myself, what would be the best way to do this? Would it be better if I get a guest and that's like an expert specialized in this stuff? Like, let's say I want to talk about sexual pleasure stuff in my podcast, of course, not this podcast, right? But in a different podcast, right? And I'm like, I mean, I could talk about my own stuff and tell my own stories and all that, but now I'm like, okay, wait, what if I get someone who spent years studied all this stuff, and what they do, they eat and drink.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, I get to ask them questions. So I'm like, okay, yeah, that would be the best, like, which will provide them more value. And then I'm like, okay, this is a different idea. What would be the route? So it's not like, oh, I have to do guests. It's more like, okay, what would be the best way? What am I trying to get? Do I want people to laugh and just get them to tell them a story? Or do I want them to like get educated? And usually for the education part, I'm like, it's always better to find an expert and then interview them or do research. Either way works.
Yeah. I think there's certain things that I can't say because they're not in my knowledge area, but they're an exploration that feels adjacent to my area. And so I'm curious about it. And like this woman on Monday, I'm going to ask her a lot about sleep and about sleep science. And then I want to bring it back because I make everything, I bring it back to my area of intimacy. So looking at like sleep divorce or the science of sleep and that kind of thing, and then how it relates to sex and to desire and to those kinds of things. So I don't know the science of that, and I don't care to go learn all that because it's too long and involved. But if I can get that information from her and then we have a discussion about it, I've learned something. My listenership has learned something. Same thing with like the episode you pulled up is a proctologist, right? This guy knows everything about, the backside. And I was like, I mean, he was an example of a guest who didn't want to have a conversation. He wanted to talk at me. Like he just barraged me with
It was
information.
more like, oh, I'm the teacher, except you have questions. I do the talking.
Yeah. Exactly. He gave no room. There was no discussion. He didn't leave any room for me to like give any examples of where this might have come up for me clinically. No. He just wanted to like be the know-it-all. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
mean, it's one of those things that you're like, you just know the first 3 minutes, it's easy for you to tell, and then you quickly just adjust and say, okay, now I'm going to like do an interview, and then I'm going to really ask them deep questions. And yeah. One other thing I notice other platforms do is that your show, I don't know, or it could work with a calling. You have get listeners, they call in, and then I don't know. I don't know if that stuff is. There are so many things about it. I don't know if it's legal or stuff like that. But they call in just like finance, like the Ramsey show, where people call in and they ask questions about finance. So people could call in and ask questions about and say, oh, I'm having this stuff. What could I do? You understand? I love watching those finance stuff. So I don't know how it would relate. You understand what I'm saying, right?
My show is not live, so I don't have people call in. That'd be more like Dr. Ruth used to have people call in, the sex therapist from like old school. That would require a producer to screen the calls, because God knows what people would call in with calling into a sex therapist, right? They'd be like, somebody's got to screen them to make sure they're not going to say something really scary. Because you get a lot of wingnuts calling in for sex related stuff.
If you are going to do that kind of show, it should not be live, because no matter the screening you do, a lot of things will pop up that you just don't want to be aired. So it's better to just do it like for 2-3 hours, and then later on do the editing, and then cut out the stuff that nonsense.
Correct, because you don't know what's going to happen, so you got to be able to.
And that's the reason why people love the show. Yeah, that's the reason why people love the show, because you don't know. Like every time I listen to those call-ins, I get some crazy stories. It's a story for me. And usually, most of the time, the story is really, you can connect easily with the people. It's not just facts pumping down my throat to my ear or stuff like that. Yeah. Your YouTube channel, right? Earlier when I pulled it, I noticed your thumbnail. It's like really on point. And it's what happened? Like, was that at some point in time? This let me see, when was that? That was in 9 months ago. The thumbnail took a different look, and it looks really good, like on brand. Yeah.
Oh, the thumbnails? You're talking about?
Yeah.
So we just made a change. We did a refresh. I did a photo shoot with a different shirt, and then I had my assistant go back and, just change everything up. I did a new intro, mid-roll, outro on my podcast, and then we changed everything on YouTube at the same time. I just think, you kind of have to constantly be doing that stuff just to have it look fresh. We were looking at what other people had, and it just felt like it needed to match the quality. I thought that the font that we were using wasn't readable enough, and so that sort of started it. And then also, you just learn as you go, and it's like the font needs to be readable because people scan through these things pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The name of the episode needs to be short. Actually, we had a podcast audit. That's where that came from. We hired somebody. She did a podcast audit. It wasn't that expensive, but that was one of her comments, was that she suggested it wasn't that expensive. It was like maybe $275 or something. This woman, I think, charged, and she went through and said, take the off. Yeah, she said, take the off the front of the name, because you're going to be competing with all the other websites that start with the name the. So we did that. She said, within, the names need to be shorter. You need to have all the episodes numbered so that people can find the number when you're referencing them, because, year after year, you're going to have hundreds of episodes, and then it's impossible to find them. Just little things like that make it easier to, when you're working in volume, that make it easier to find stuff and get back to it. And also, when people are scanning through, you got to make sure that you capture them, because otherwise they're just going to roll right past it. Also, we used to do unique art for every single episode, and that is so labor intensive. So we stopped doing that. So you'll see like the first season, we definitely did that, into the second season, and then we stopped. We just created cover art, and that's what we do. We still create, when there's a guest, we still drop them into a template that has that, but we don't do that for all the other episodes. All the individual episodes and stuff don't get a whole unique
and this
creation.
one, this rebrand you've done on the podcast, it's like on point. Like if I've watched one of your video and then I see another video, let's say pop up on my feed, right? And I instantly know that, yeah, it's recognizable that, it's this lady. Another thing about YouTube is why it's different from regular podcasting platforms is that the people that go to podcast platform, most of the times, right, they already know you. They heard about you on social media. They heard about you from events. A friend recommended your podcast. And so they're going there and they're already, like, they kind of trust you because whoever recommended the podcast, they trust the person. So they're checking out the podcast. So they're already sold. You're just going to, like, so let's get the product. But on YouTube, I'm seeing your stuff recommended to me. I don't even know who you are. I see a lady smiling and I see a title. Like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Right. So it's a question of your stranger danger. Will this be a waste of my time? I'm seeing 52 minutes, right? It's not something. So I'm clicking. I'm trying to say, okay, is it good enough? Would I get value from it? And so that's why the title, the thumbnail, it's all about packaging it, trying to sell the person to watch the video, right? Which is way different from podcast platform that people already come in there, they listen to you. Right?
Well, the hashtags really matter. The description really matters. Tagging. So tagging your guests so that their audience, again, finds you easily. YouTube is never my primary. It's always secondary, but it's like the content exists. Also, for the first season, I was doing a lot of just audio only, and it's so much easier to do audio only, but I recognize that video really gives you so much more
Reach.
extension, I guess. Yeah, just so much more reach. So I force myself, because I don't want to always be camera ready. It's a little work. It takes more work to like be lit and be on camera and, whatever. But I just realized it does give you more reach. So I started forcing myself. I started on Zoom and then I would export and do that. And then at some point I switched over to Riverside and, just each step professionalizes things a little bit more. And they have the clips. And so we started also uploading clips, and those clips get repurposed to different platforms, including the shorts on YouTube, including Instagram. So each step kind of is a progression of how the podcast gets promoted and increased viewership.
Yeah. One of the things, growing your podcast is nice, right? It's awesome. But one of the things what I've been thinking recently is the fact that the podcast is just a medium like that falls into your personal brand. So as much as possible, you also want to use the podcast to like grow and that's why I was like hammering on solo episodes and all that, because it's like you don't have to go out of your way now to try to grow a personal brand. You're just doing episodes, showing up and putting on the YouTube and all these other platforms that you are active on. It's your personal brand, and of course there are other benefits from podcasts. But then, yeah, you're like Dr. Jenn Kennedy. I know her, the sex specialist. Yeah. Um, could you I know earlier on you mentioned we use Riverside. Um, are you the one producing your podcast? I know you did mention you have an assistant. And okay, what do you do for the podcast? What does your assistant do? What are the apps and the tools you use for the podcast?
Yeah, we're super low production. I've got one assistant that's helping. So I record it in Riverside, and once we finish, I go back in and I do a brief introduction to the episode, and then I leave those two there. So that introduction is going to be between 30 seconds and 90 seconds. Usually it's about a minute. And she then exports those two things and, clips them if needed. And that's it. Like she does not, she goes in and puts the mid-roll. So I break partway through and she puts a mid-roll promo. She puts something at the beginning and something at the end, the introduction and the out roll kind of thing, end roll, whatever they call it. And that's it. She's taking, she's putting in the show notes that are going to be uploaded to Spotify as our primary, and then Apple is secondary. We're also on a couple other sites that it just trigger posts to. And then I have an intern. Actually, I do have an intern who is posting to YouTube. He's exporting and building the files. He's also He's also taking the transcripts. I lost him again. Difficulties.
Okay. You were talking about your assistant. Okay, so your assistant does the editing and uploading and then adding the descriptions and all those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I also have an intern, and he takes the files and puts them on YouTube. He also builds the files that you'll see the thumbnails. He also takes the transcriptions from Riverside and builds, like, he'll write an article, because that's another extension that helps with SEO for the website. So he'll write articles from the episodes, and those get turned into individual articles. So that's sort of the progression. And then from each episode, which I have a newsletter that runs every week. 1 week will be just an article. The next week will be the podcast. So every 2 weeks, a podcast runs, and every other podcast is a guest. And then the following podcast is an individual episode. So for each of those that run, a newsletter will highlight that episode. And there'll also be a subsequent Instagram, few clips that come out, as well as, like an announcement. So yeah, there's like a whole production cycle that graphics that get built around each of those things that get kind of dribbled out along a 10-day period.
Well, okay.
So, and I basically one assistant that's
Yeah. So right now you're living the dream all indie podcasters have, to have someone helping them out with their podcast.
Am I? I'm living the dream, but I'll tell you, podcasting doesn't make me any money.
It's
at
as if you're
all.
reading my mind.
So I
That's the
don't know
question
if
I'm
it's
about
the
to ask
dream.
you. If the podcast makes any money.
Yeah. Not so far. I feel like it's kind of like writing a book, the podcast has not been a moneymaker. It's not remunerative, but it leads to other things. First of all, it does help with, sending me out to, I send it to clients and they find it useful. I think it reinforces my brand and my authority for other purposes, which does get me hired as, in my primary work as a therapist. My goal ultimately is to do more public speaking, so to give big speeches and keynotes and that type of thing. So it is, I think, leading to that goal. But yeah, no, Spotify and these services make it so difficult. Like, you have to get such high numbers and such high viewership that I don't know how that's ever going to be
Excuse
feasible.
me, teacher. Can you see my hand? Very stop. Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned public speaking. What if you let's say I was to invite you to come give a speech, and you had the opportunity to pick. Let's say I gave you 10 different public speaking opportunities in 10 different places, right? And I told you, well, pick the topics you want to speak on these different places. Now I know you've picked those topics in your head right now. Now, what I want you to do is, what if you do solo episodes on those topics and actually give those speech and post it as solo episodes on YouTube and your Spotify podcast platform?
That's a great idea. Yeah, just treat it as a platform to demonstrate your public speech. That's great.
Yeah,
That's a
because
great
people
idea.
would see you give a speech and say, yeah, she really knows what she's talking about in this video. We should reach out to her to come give a talk on wherever platform.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great idea. I think I approach it probably a little more clinically in a different voice than I would if I knew it was a speech. But you're right. It's either way. It is an opportunity, and I could probably do that and have it be well received.
Yeah,
if I did it.
Yeah, when I asked you about the podcast making money, and you mentioned that it's not yet making money directly. Of course, I know it leads to other things. It helps to establish you as a thought leader, and those things we can't exactly measure how much, like, can't really measure exactly, but it's definitely working. But the problem right now is that podcasters, they have valuable content, but because they don't have gazillion numbers of listeners and views, they don't monetize their content, right? And for me, I was recently one of the guests I had on my podcast shared this with me, and so I don't know if it will be if it will make sense for you, but I'm just going to share it. If it makes sense, great. If not, good. Radio platforms and TV stations, they are looking for valuable content. Now, of course, if you were to go to radio platforms and TV stations, you then have to, like, police the language you use a bit, right? I don't know if you're, I don't know how you people have conversation, but you people like, radio, everybody's listening to radio, so you have to like adjust and the way you talk about things when people are talking about it. But other than that, the message will not change because it's radio. Kids will be listening to radio and everything. So, but the whole idea is that if you can be on a radio station, right? What will happen is that the radio, they already have their audience, right? And once you're on the radio station, you can then reach out to local brands, like local companies and all that, and tell them to sponsor the show. And then they would sponsor the show because now it's there's no question of do you have an audience because you're already tapping into the radio audience. Your content is good itself. And so you see how it helps you to bypass the door of, oh, I don't have an audience, so I can't sponsor my show. Of course, you have to do the work yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it makes sense for you, you can try that out and explore it. Yeah. And
it's a great idea.
apart from the making money,
Need you to
the
be
making
my
money on radio, you also get exposed to other audience on the radio. So by people just listening to your show on the radio, it grows your personal brand. It also grows yeah, that's it. It grows your personal. The thing is, the interesting thing I saw is that let's assume you are not going to make money on the radio, right? I don't know how much it costs for airtime on over there, right? Over where you're calling from. But let's assume you don't want to make money, you don't want to sponsor it, right? You could then talk about, oh, if you want to listen to more of these episodes, you can check it out on Spotify and Apple. And then you could also say, that, oh, if you want me to speak about this in your events and stuff like that, reach out to me via whatever the link or stuff is that. You get, people are just listening and they train a local event together. And yeah, you are. You called, I answered. Yeah, so
yeah, it's true.
Okay. You've been doing the podcast now for 3 years, and you've done the podcast audit, and now I can definitely see, like, without you even telling me that something happened, there was a breath of fresh air on the podcast. Like the branding is just different, right? I've not even listened to any of the episode, but I know that something touched it. What are the projections you have for the podcast looking forward? I know you mentioned you want to use the podcast as a means to speak, to be a public speaker and speak more often. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, just the numbers changed. I will, from year 1 to year 3, we tripled in numbers, and this year we're already way up from that. Like, I've got goals in terms of where we're at. I'm hoping to, again, probably triple from last year. So what are the numbers? I don't know. I might want to tell you.
Triple. You are hiding something. It's all right. No problem.
Well, no, I'll tell you. Also, Spotify just did something weird in the last couple of weeks where they changed how they calculate everything. So the numbers are kind of confusing. I don't understand them. They just sent something out that I have to read, but I'll tell you. Okay, so year 1, I had about 1,000. Year 2, I had 3,000. This year, I'm up to 6,000. So, so it's doubling. From year 1 to year 2, I went. I tripled, and then this year, so it's like, I think I see acceleration, which is great, and I see a trend. So it's going up, but it's we're fighting for it. We're fighting for the listens. So yeah, it's consistency. I'm building a list. I have a newsletter list that I went through a business course, by the way, 2 rounds of it with this woman up in San Francisco, and she was adamant that I had to send a newsletter out every week and continue to market and be very consistent, because people expect it needs to come out on the same day, and it needs to, people have an expectation, and it's fine. Whatever you do, just be consistent about it. And so I'm really,
how big is this?
I try to do that. And so my podcast comes out every 2 weeks. My list right now is 700.
That's 300
people.
more than I have. Wow. Crushing it.
I mean, again, and most of that list is built through me giving talks. Like I've been giving a lot of lectures, and then I have people sign up for my list. It's slowly building, but I get a really high open rate. I send it out through MailChimp. It's mostly therapists on that list who are interested in my topic. So that's the thing, is I have a very engaged audience. So it's a good list. But it's relatively small. I've been running a program that's related to my work, and I part of that list building was to get people to convert to come and do my live program. And she said that the math on that is about a 3% conversion. So my list needs to be like 3 times as big to get what I want in terms of conversion. but listenership is definitely up. I can see it growing. Each week I add people to the list. So subscribers, and I can see every time I release an episode, people listen before I even announce it. So, and 25% of my list aren't even located in the US. So I don't know how many of those people on my list. My list is people that I've met. People that are listening to the podcast don't necessarily get my newsletter. I don't know exactly how they find it. And certainly with 25% not even being in the US, they're finding it on Spotify, I think, or Apple or YouTube or something else. I'm not sure because I don't know
I
who those
think
people are.
that's where the solo episodes will shine in, right? You can then make solo episodes that would involve you sharing a lead magnet that's really valuable, and for that would involve people to have to go to your website to sign up to join the email list. I don't know if it makes sense.
And I've done a bunch of lead magnets. I haven't really found any that were like, that was amazing. Like I've done quizzes. I've created like I did a quiz where like, what's your attachment style, like your sexual, attachment style. I've done a couple of things like that just haven't produced a ton of interest, where you're trying to capture people's emails to get them on the list, to get them to but every time I send it out, I get a few unsubscribes, and I'm like, get a few, lose a few.
I mean, for me,
Just
I'm just going to say, for as a perspective of a user of the internet, right? If you tell me if I'm listening to a podcast episode and you tell me subscribe to my email list, like, see, this is my ear. It has been designed to filter out call to action. I won't hear anything. But if, let's say I will give an example for my own case now. Let's say I do an episode on how to market your podcast with $10 or less, right? That's the episode, my solo episode. I'm breaking things down and I start teaching everything. I'm like, okay, if you want to do this, I've created a checklist, or I've created a direction that will show you step by step, that the lead magnets would help them take the next step, would help them apply the thing I've taught them so far. So now it makes sense for them to want to go to the lead magnet. So it's not just, it's not just an ad, right? It shouldn't be like an ad. It should be like, okay, I taught you, you should work on how to work on YouTube as a podcaster, right? And I'm like, I have designed for you 10 different Canva templates that you don't need to design. You just need to change the text and change the color.
Yeah.
And it's free. And you can get it on my website at this link, right? So it makes sense that after I've showed them all the secrets on how to leverage YouTube for their podcast growth, the next step for them is the thumbnail, which is a very key, essential part of YouTube. And then a list of maybe viral titles of how they can title their stuff or prompt. It's not, the lead magnet is not an ad. It's more like, oh, this is the next step you should take, right? Does that make sense? Now, of course, you could do the ad part where you like, but that one doesn't really convert as much as when you have the next step for them. When it's like, oh, you make an episode and the next step, you make an episode, it's the next step, right? And that's why a podcast guesting converts way more than we that are podcast hosts. Because if you're on the podcast where you talk about sex and your call to action is the next step for them, I don't know if it makes sense. So it's not an ad, it's a next step. So yeah, so that's the way it's, because people want to take action. They want to, I don't know how to apply, but I know you understand what I'm saying. So you figure it out.
Yeah. Sometimes that little conversion that you described isn't as intuitive to me. I don't know. I lose that spot, right? Because every time because there's all these different entry points. Some people are following me on Instagram, but they're not listening to the episodes. Like we've had that, I had a gal on, Kelly Casperson. She's pretty hot right now. She's a urologist, but she's also big in the menopause space. When she came on the show, she was on Instagram and she, collaborated with me on the Instagram posts. We got each post got 45,000 likes. I mean, it was crazy viral, but it did not convert to people 45,000 each, but it did not convert to people jumping over to the episode. And I was like, dang it, people were liking the clips. They were liking the magic clips. They were not jumping over, could not get them over to the episode. The episode did fine, got a couple hundred listens, did not do great like I thought it would. Meanwhile, conversely, I interviewed this other woman, Michelle Mays, who is pretty known in her space. Her clip she never accepted, she's low on technology. She never accepted the collaboration invitation. So her clip didn't get a lot of traction, but she sent it out in her own newsletter. Her episode got 600 600
Wow.
listens like overnight because her audience is so dedicated that her episode went crazy fast. Like all these people, all these women listen to it because they'll do whatever she says. So it's so weird, right? It's part of it is like if they have a dedicated following and they say this thing and you make it easy, they don't have to click link in bio and then go over and find the episode.
Yeah.
So it's interesting sort of what converts. And when you tell people go here and then they have to do an extra step,
Yeah.
sometimes you lose
Yeah.
them. And so,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
know,
usually for Instagram,
yeah,
it's just like building awareness. Then, for Instagram, I like to look at it as it's a platform, right? I'm not so obsessed over getting to people to listen to the podcast. I'm more like, okay, I build an awareness and I can get them to like take action, maybe do something, but not necessarily to listen to the podcast, right? So I assume I don't have a podcast, right? If I had Instagram, how would I leverage it to like grow my stuff and all that?
yeah.
But a newsletter is different.
I mean, I did get from that. Yeah, I did grow my audience from that woman. I think I grew my audience maybe 250 to 300 followers that were in my target, which is great. I'll take it. But it didn't translate into people listening more to the podcast, which is kind of what I was hoping. I'll take the followers. That's fine. But you know what I mean? Like still trying to get them over to Spotify. What's
yeah.
also interesting to me is that I have as many people on YouTube followers as I do on Spotify, and I give YouTube almost no attention. YouTube is supposed to be a bunch of men, and men are not my primary audience. Women are, and yet I have as much activity. So it's a little confusing.
For me,
sometimes.
the thing about
You know what I
Instagram,
mean?
social media, and TikTok is that oftentimes when you're trying to convince someone to listen to your podcast, that person doesn't even listen to podcasts in the first place. So now you're trying to convince them to do two things. You're trying to convince them to listen to consume podcast content and to consume your podcast, which is way different from someone who is like a
Yeah.
podcast listener. The choice they only have to make is your podcast worthy enough? And some persons they don't even know about podcasts.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your
true.
story. I'm amazed how 1 hour just passed. It looks as if we didn't even do anything. I'm starting wondering like we've not even started. What's going on here? Okay, yeah, I'm invested in this podcast story, and I'd love to like follow up and maybe in 3-6 months, whatever happens, maybe you get that speaking gig, and we'll break things down. Maybe you get 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
I'd love to celebrate with you on the podcast.
Well, I'm gonna do what you suggested.
suggest
I am
anything?
gonna. You did. You said treat your podcast like it's a speaking opportunity and just act as if. And I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna see how it goes and see how people respond. I'm gonna use that voice and just go and see what happens. I have some listeners that listen to everything no matter what, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah. If it works,
Yeah.
if it works out, we know. So, and if the podcast starts making money, don't forget to. It's about
That's right.
30%. Yeah,
That's right.
So yeah. We'll I didn't say anything before they come and start asking me what I mean. For people that they've listened to you and they want to they're interested in the topic and they want to learn more about you and your podcast.
Sure, they can find me on Spotify or Apple at Pleasure Project, Sex and Relationships. So that's for the podcast, and they can find me online at pleasureproject.us.
Okay.
Yeah, and on YouTube at Dr. Jenn Kennedy. Yeah.
Okay. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Jenn Kennedy, for being on the podcast. Please, this story is interesting. I think I know we're in 3 years into the story, but I feel like we're just in chapter 1, and I'm excited to see what would chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 be like. And if there's any way I can help, let me know. And if there's any discovery, success story, or anything, I'd love to be part of it.
Sounds good.
That's it for today's episode of my podcast story. I hope you enjoyed listening to this journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. And don't forget to join the newsletter at mypodcaststory.com/join for more stories and podcasting insights. Until next time, keep telling your story because someone out there needs to hear it.